Okay, so you're writing an email or maybe just a text message, and you stop. You're wondering, did I just learned something new or have I learnt it? It's a classic English puzzle, right? Well, today we are going to solve it. So let's just get right into it. Learned or learnt. You see them both all the time. One has that ed ending, the other has a t. So, does that mean one of them is just flat out wrong? It's a question that trips up pretty much everyone, and the real answer is actually way more interesting than you think. And the answer is, well, it's a little complicated, but in a really cool way. Because the truth is, they can both be correct. This isn't just some dry, boring grammar lesson. It's a story about how a language can change and spread across the entire world. So, let's dive in. Right, so the first and honestly the most common reason we have these two versions of a word comes down to a simple difference between British and American English. You could say there's a whole ocean of difference between them. And this split wasn't some kind of accident either. People like Noah Webster actually worked to simplify American spellings to help create a unique national identity. Pretty neat, huh? Here's the basic rule of thumb. If you see a past tense word that ends with a T, it is very, very likely the British English version. And if you see that exact same verb ending in ed, you're probably looking at the American English Standard. It's a pretty simple pattern, but it clears up a ton of confusion. Let's see this in action because it makes it so much clearer. So in the UK, you might say the fire burnt the toast, you dreamt of flying, and a dolphin leaped out of the water. But if you're in the US, you'd say the fire burned the toast, you dreamed of flying, and the dolphin leaped. See? It's the exact same idea, just a slightly different flavor of English. And the pattern just keeps going with other super common verbs. Let's go back to our first question. In British English, you learnt a new skill, but in American English, you learned it. Something smelt good, or it smelled good. You spelt your name, or you spelled it. The pattern's pretty obvious once you see it, isn't it? So the big takeaway here is that neither one is wrong. It's just a style choice, depending on which dialect you're using. The only real rule is to pick a style and just stick with it. If you're writing an essay, don't mix up burnt and learned in the same paper. It's that consistency that makes your writing look sharp and professional. But what happens when it's not a simple UK versus US thing? Sometimes a word pops up that isn't technically correct according to the old rulebooks, but it gets used so much that it just starts to feel right. And this is where the story of English gets really wild. So our first case study is the verb to creep, to move slowly and quietly, trying not to be seen. Seems like a pretty simple verb, right? Well, its past tense is causing a bit of a stir. Okay, so officially, the way your English teacher would want you to write it, the past tense of creep is crept, as in the cat crept silently towards the mouse. But I bet you've heard people say creeped. And while crept is the textbook answer, this new form has, well, it's creeped into the language. So where on earth did it come from? It all started with a phrasal verb, to creep out, which means to make someone feel really uneasy or scared. The past tense for that is always creeped out, like that scary movie really creeped me out. And this phrase got so popular, especially in American slang, that the word creeped just started getting used for the original verb, too. It's a fantastic example of how language can change right before our eyes. Here's another perfect example. To dive. The grammatically correct by the book past tense is dived. He dived into the swimming pool. Simple enough. But especially in North America, you will almost always hear someone say dove. He dove into the swimming pool. So what happened there? Well, the leading theory is that dive got mixed up with another really common verb, drive. The past tense of drive is drove, and our brains just love patterns. That switch from I've to olve in drive to drove felt so natural that people started applying it to dive. And just like that, dove was born. A lot of official style guides still don't love it, but it's so common now it might as well be a rule. And for our last case, we have maybe the most famous verb confusion of them all, to shrink. Now this is an irregular verb, and that's usually where the trouble begins. It actually has two correct past forms, but here's the kicker. You can't just swap them. Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky. These two words do different jobs. The simple past tense is shrank, as in my sweater shrank in the wash. Simple. The past participle is shrunk, and you use that with a helping verb, like has or have. For example, my sweater has shrunk. The problem is, people started using shrunk for both, and we can blame one thing in particular for that. This movie title, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, is, from a grammar perspective, wrong. It should be the simple past, Honey, I shrank the kids, or it needs that helping verb, Honey, I've shrunk the kids. But the title was just so catchy that it basically cemented this mix-up in pop culture. And now, shrunk is used as the simple past all the time, even though shrank is the textbook answer. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? We've looked at dialects, we've looked at grammar rules that are bending and breaking. It all boils down to one single golden rule. All right, let's bring it all home. We've seen that a lot of these confusing words are really just a simple choice between British and American English, where both are totally correct. We've also seen how language is alive, with mistakes like dove becoming so normal that they're basically right now. So what does this mean for you? It means the number one most important rule is just to be consistent. Pick a style, British or American, textbook or common usage, and just stick with it throughout your writing. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Cases like dove and shrunk prove that language isn't some fixed thing set in stone. It's a living, breathing creature that's always changing. The rules are really just a picture of how we're using words at this exact moment in time. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What common mistake that we all make today might just be the official grammar rule of tomorrow?